All right, hello everyone. We are celebrating the library's 100th anniversary this year and invite you to pick up a copy of The Town of Leesburg Celebrates Thomas Balch Library's 100 Years. Copies of the current Balch column listing programs, classes, tours, and exhibits are available on the table in the back of the room, along with other informative literature about the library. Events are posted on our website and social media. The spring newsletter, as well as back issues, may be accessed in their entirety on our website. For those of you that are here, there's a water fountain back to the left. The restrooms are also all the way back as well. This is where I say, please turn off all electric devices or have them on mute. Masks are not required, but they are available in the back on that back table. Please note that this program is hybrid, so the audience is both in person and virtual. We are recording it, so it will be available on YouTube after this session. Okay. For those that are at home, there is about a 45-second delay. So if you have any questions, please put them into the chat, and then we will get to them at the end of the program. It is my pleasure to welcome back today our guest speaker, the Honorable Jeanette Irby, retired Loudoun County Circuit Court Judge and former town attorney for the town of Leesburg. She is now with Juridical Solutions as a mediator. She has researched land records dating back from the 1700s and participated in genealogical seminars sponsored by the Warrenton Courthouse chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. She holds a BS from Central Michigan University and a JD from Thomas Cooley Law School. Please welcome the Honorable Jeanette Irby.
Morning, everyone. So I'm not used to doing the hybrid virtual, and usually I have a few more folks in the room, but if you don't mind, and I don't believe you're on camera, if you can just tell me a little bit about yourself and your research journey, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Kathy Fetzer, and I'm just here to learn all of this. I haven't really done any family type research other than on ancestry.
All right, so a new one. Welcome. Yes.
I am Catherine Bond. I was actually just born right here in the old hospital.
Okay.
My first family member in Loudoun was actually in 1757, Gustavus Brown.
Okay. Welcome. Okay.
I'm Linda Jackson King. My family is from Loudoun County. This is my home birth. I'm just a newbie.
Okay.
I start the research.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah, my name is Ali. My interest is more from the point of view of artificial intelligence, like text processing, and I have an interest in social issues and this type of history. So I thought coming here might be interesting because this is a field which might have something new to discover, something to find out.
Sure. Absolutely. All right. Well, welcome, everyone. My presentation is narrowly focused in your genealogical research, and it's about researching courthouse records and specifically chancery records. So the first thing, in order to make our research successful, and for the new people who are new to genealogy, I don't know if you've experienced the 3 a.m. rabbit hole, where you start pulling a string and then before you know it, you're off on some hunt that yields nothing but lots of interesting information. And this is to kind of help you focus your research when it comes to chancery records. So the first thing that you have to do to save yourself a lot of time is to know where your courthouse is located. Now we have a couple of Loudoun County natives, and so courthouses are generally located in the county seat. So Loudoun County, first of all, you need to determine the name of the county. And over time, because of the way Virginia was first organized, those have changed over time. So in order to determine the appropriate name of the county for the time period that you're looking for, you need to determine the date of incorporation of that county. You need to determine if there was a predecessor county, because Loudoun broke off from a bigger tract of localities, and is the courthouse located in a county, city, or town. Virginia is unique from many commonwealths and states in that counties will have their own courthouses, cities will have their own courthouses, but towns generally do not. So you're not going to generally find, you may find like the courthouse is actually located in the town of Leesburg, but it's not separate and apart from the records that you would find in Loudoun County. Whereas in Fairfax, you have Fairfax City and Fairfax County. Those are two separate, distinct municipalities that have separate record repositories, and sometimes there's a crossover. If you go to localities that were set up, for example, by the Northwest Ordinance, it's a completely different scheme. So you do need to determine, was the courthouse taking records during the time period that you're looking for? And the way to determine that is determining the date of when that courthouse became available. So for example, and I left out some of the elements because there's like 6 of them, but I just want you to get a flavor of it. So Fauquier County, for example, was incorporated in 7/15/59 from Prince William. Okay, it broke off from Prince William. In 1731, Prince William was formed from Stafford and King George. And then Stafford was formed in 1664. So if you're looking for records for Fauquier County prior to 1759, you're going to be going to Prince William, because Fauquier did not exist prior to 1759 as far as records are concerned. And these are the types of records that are available in Fauquier County. And then we have Loudoun County. Loudoun came from Fairfax in 1757. And the courthouse is the repository of all its original records from its formation since 1757. Loudoun County records include pretty much the same records that most of the courthouses contain. So we're going to talk a little bit about where we're going to find lots of information in chancery records. All right, and some of those are wills and trusts. And things that you're going to be looking for with respect to wills and trusts, there's going to be relevant information as you go forward in your search. First, and I'm just going to give the basics with respect to what you're going to find in a will and trust. Generally, it's drawn by an attorney. It's executed by the testator, which is I'm the person who's drawing the will, and 2 witnesses. You can also have holographic wills, which are handwritten by the testator. So if I wanted to handwrite my own will, I could do so. And that will, back in the day, would have been validated by, it has to be all handwritten, it has to be signed, and it has to be dated. And then the witnesses to verify the handwriting, and the handwriting has to be in the testator's hand, which means I have to write it, which makes it a holographic will. And the documents from the time period up until very recently, this is what was necessary for it to be a valid will. What sometimes put it into what's called a chancery suit is that someone is contesting the validity of the will. But the wills, handwritten or whether it was written by an attorney, not written in the testator's hand, would have been recorded in the courthouse. Wills have lots of clues. And it may not be, for example, if I'm researching John Smith, I may not necessarily need information about John Smith, but I might need information about his relatives. I might have a close relationship to one of his relatives, or perhaps a witness. So what that will and what that file is going to have, the will isn't going to have the date of death, because most people can't predict their death unless they're pretty close, and you're going to know that. But it will, upon recording, have the date of death. It's going to have generally where the testator and the family were living as they dispose of the property. It's going to have the heirs, because they may have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 children. And so generally it's going to list them whether they're receiving property or not. It's going to mention his wife and or dower. So if a man was married back in the day, his wife would always have a 1/3 interest of any real property of which the testator or the man owned, because women didn't own property in their own right at that time. It's going to list the beneficiaries, which may or may not be the children. It's going to have witnesses, and many times witnesses were witnesses of convenience. So for example, let's say I wasn't related to John Smith, but I knew where John Smith lived, and I knew that there was two families that were very close, and sometimes you can just place your ancestor close in time and close in location to someone who may have drawn up that will. Okay, so for example, in my family, there was this legend, I'll call it, that my grandmother was estranged from her father for marrying a man that her father did not approve of. And that was the family legend forever. After the people who would know about it passed, namely my mother, who believed this, I mean, she had no reason not to tell me the truth, and she believed it. I found that her mother and my grandfather, my grandparents, lived next door to my great-grandfather, literally lived next door. And he really partitioned off a section of land for them to have a home there. So the estrangement wasn't about who my grandmother married. It was about something else, I assume, because why else would my grandfather have given them property to live there? And they had their first 3 children there. And then something happened, right? I don't know what that something was, because my mom believed that the estrangement had to do with who she married. I'm assuming it didn't, because they live next door to each other. But there was definitely an estrangement for all of my lifetime and the lifetime that my mother enjoyed, because my grandmother never spoke to her father since my birth, and he was still alive. Because I remember, you know how families get together at funerals, and either that's where they make up or that's where a new fight starts. So that was always a topic of discussion. But the point of that story being that sometimes the land records and wills give you a different picture from what was handed down through the family members. Tells you who the witnesses are, tells you what type of estate they had, the amount of real estate and personality, and we can't judge it on today's standards, obviously. So you need to understand in the time period that you're looking, 2 cows and a piano and a cupboard and some clothes, that may have indicated wealth during that time period, right? Whereas today, we may look at it, well, a couple of cows and a piano, not much. So you do have to focus on the time period that you're looking to determine the relative status of your family. The chancery records also incorporate some land records. They include other items besides just deeds. They include grantor and grantee indexes. Grantor is the person who gives the property. Grantee is the person who receives the property. It has tax records, and sometimes those tax records may say who actually paid the tax. It may not have been the owner. It may have been someone else who's paying the taxes. It contains plats. Plats are very helpful. Not only are their descriptions interesting because it's not by numbers. Back then it's by how far a horse galloped from a rock to a tree. It names other monuments that people kept track of with respect to surveying their property. But you can also see how if your family had a big farm, how they may have partitioned it off to other heirs, or how they may have petitioned it off to pay a debt to other people that they may have sold the land to. If you wonder why, the family farm all of a sudden disappeared when you had a large tract of land and it eventually winnowed down, you can see what happened. It will include trusts, wills, and then warrants. And warrants are warrants in debt. If you owe a bill, for example, and someone sues you on a warrant, that could be reported as a judgment, or there's also warrants for land. So general deed terminology, again, the grantor, the person who conveys the property, the grantee, the person who receives it. Consideration. Most deeds and many wills, quite frankly, will say in consideration of, and it could be in consideration of $1, it could be in consideration of, let's say you're trading land for a debt, you're trading land for something else, or love and affection, if they're just passing it to a family member or a friend, in consideration of the love and affection that I have for my daughter. That is consideration. It's anything of value to the person that is conveying the property. Then we have in deeds heirs and assigns. So for example, I'm giving it to my heirs, I'm giving it to their children. Sometimes property was conveyed instead of outright in fee simple, like I'm conveying it to my daughter outright. She's going to own it, as opposed to I'm going to keep a life estate for myself. So for example, or for my husband, and I could say, I couldn't have owned property. So let's say my husband is saying, I'm going to convey to my wife a life estate, which means she can stay on the property for her life. And then when her life ends, then I'm going to convey it to someone else, which means that during the period of time that I'm alive, I get to live there, and my children, my no good children, let's say, can't kick me off the property, and that I will have somewhere to live. And they can't force a sale because I would have only owned a 1/3 interest in that property. So the other 2/3 owners could have sold it in a suit, and then I would have gotten my third. But with a life estate, then I don't have to move because I get to live there through my life. And then whoever else my spouse would have determined receives a property. It's going to contain a property description. And what's interesting about property descriptions, many times families lived in close relation to each other. So if I have the Smith family farm, but I know people married and Smith is such a common name, adjacent to the Smith family farm may be the Jones, and you may be also related to the Jones. And, adjacent to that may be the Alexanders. I mean, so when you look at property descriptions, it's also sometimes going to give you a breakdown of who lives surrounding your piece of property. Well, it's not going to be that way for cities and towns generally, but in some of these older deeds, the property description can be very helpful so that you know who your neighbors were. There's types of, again, the dower interest, the woman would take 1/3 of the property. Type of deed. So there's quitclaim deeds, which is probably, it doesn't convey the property completely. It just conveys my interest in the property. So let's say let's say my dad passed away and, we had 4 siblings and he gave each of us a 25% interest. I want to give away or sell my 25% interest. So all I can give away is what I own. So I'm quitclaiming my interest in the property. So if someone else is buying it, let's say Mrs. Smith is buying my property, she is only taking what I own. She doesn't get the other 75% because I can only give what I have. So quitclaim deeds, you have to be very careful when you accept something on a quitclaim because you're then acknowledging that perhaps they don't own all of the property. We have a warranty deed, which is of course a much better deed. That's conveying, in theory, all of the property with covenants of title, which means I'm guaranteeing that the title is clear. I know we all now purchase title insurance, but back in the day, there used to be abstracts of title that would definitively tell you where the property was conveyed and how much was of that property was conveyed. Now we buy title insurance, which supposedly shields us from problems with respect to who owns the property. But then, of course, there's other issues such as judgments and liens. We have deeds of gift. Deeds of gift is when you're giving it to someone for basically love and affection, not a monetary value. I'm just gifting my interest away. And again, it's just your interest. It could be warranty or a quitclaim. Also on deeds or witnesses, and they're usually signed and sealed. And what's interesting that you want to note is that when conveying these instruments, it wasn't immediate. People didn't go to the courthouse right away and record these deeds. So the date of when the property was conveyed could be drastically different from when it was recorded because people went to town when it was convenient. They didn't always go the very next day to record these instruments. And when you're really stuck on a problem, and this is all you have, sometimes these dates can become critically important. Okay, again, what you find in a deed, where the deed was executed and who it was sent to. Dates of execution, I talked a little bit about when it was recorded and the acknowledgement dates, consideration, the property description, talk to that. If you're looking for people, what's interesting about the property description, like who are the neighbors, and then you can always link that to a census to see perhaps where your families were. Like if you knew that you were the neighbors of the Smith family, then you can look for the Smiths in the census, because many times the census enumerators will go from house to house to house. And it would help you determine, like if I know that my family were good friends of the Smiths, or they lived next to the Smiths and they intermarried, knowing who their neighbors are sometimes helps us, again, get a clue. These are all about clues, finding people that we don't have any contact with. Other details, references, sometimes wills will reference other documents. You can find out sometimes, did your ancestor make a mark, i.e. could they not write and they would just make an X? Or did they actually have a signature? It lets you know the literacy of your relatives. Okay, now we have legal suits, and that's really what we're going to spend some time talking about today. Legal suits contain certain types of documents, pleadings. Does everyone know what a pleading is? There's like a complaint, there's an answer, there's parties to the lawsuit. So the file is going to have what we call generically pleadings in that file. The names of the parties will be in the pleadings. So if you had a relative who was sued or sued people, or had a will, or had a land transaction that went south, or had debt, their names are going to show up in these pleadings. Just because you spelled your name Smith, S-M-I-T-H, don't be afraid to look for S-M-Y-T-H. I know my name has changed over time with respect to my maiden name, with respect to how it was spelled. Apparently my maiden name or my married name was as well. So you can always start with, S-M-I-T-H, but don't be afraid to be creative with spelling in order to bring more information into the net that you're casting. So the types of matters of the records that we're going to be researching, if you see a CL on the file, that means at law. That means it's a contract case. The records that we're mining today are called chancery suits. Chancery suits have to do with real estate, divorce, domestic matters, will matters, deeds, trusts, that sort of thing. Heirs. They're not actions at law, they're actions in chancery. And then we have criminal matters. There's a few of those pleadings in there. I know over time courts have scanned a lot of these records, but most of the information that you are going to find that will be helpful to you will be in chancery matters. There's some are at law matters in those files as well. So every courthouse has a real estate online database. I picked this case because this was an extensive case that I did when I worked for Fauquier County. Anyone use the online real estate portal when you go to pay your taxes or anything? Have any of you fiddled around with it? Well, there's two types of portals. One that just has the basic information about your property, and then there's another portal that you can use for free over at the courthouse that talks about owners and past owners and the types of real estate. And so with respect to this one, this was a family in Fauquier, had been there a long time, and they had 3 parcels of land. And I was, as county attorney in Fauquier, I had to sell the property because the heirs had either disappeared, long since stopped paying taxes. And this is how it ended up on my radar with respect to a chancery case. And so it was the Botts family. And back in the day, African Americans were not allowed to record their deeds, but they did own the property. And so over time, like many families, they would get married, they would die, they'd move away, but the transactions were not recorded. Eventually, after the last family moves away or stops paying taxes, then it comes to the attention of the treasurer, right? And they're like, we need these taxes. And how do we get these taxes? Well, we need to sell the property. We can't sell the property until we notify all the heirs. Virginia is not one of those states where you can go in and buy it for a tax lien, wait a certain period of time, and you own the property. So when you see those commercials, they do not apply to Virginia. They did probably 50 years ago, but all of those tax deeds and liens have since extinguished. So if someone tries to sell you one in a scam, it's no longer valid. So forget it, it's not going to work. So this was the Botts family. And it tells you a little bit about the property, what the value is worth, what the property's worth, whether it's subdivided, the tax district. And then down here, it has notes. It says how it was transferred into who, and some of these were quitclaim deeds, but there's a lot of information on this page about not only Mr. Botts, but his family members down here on the bottom. A chancery suit was opened in that the Fauquier County Board of Supervisors sued the trustee and who they believe the owners of the property were. This gentleman, Mr. Chapman, he believed that this land was valuable, so he went around to different relatives and said, hey, Martha, you know, I see that you owe $1,000 to Fauquier Hospital. How about I pay that debt for you and you quitclaim your interest in that land over to me? Remember what I said about quitclaim? It's only the interest that you owe. So Martha said, sure, I want my debt paid. Maybe you give her a little more money than that. And you can have this property that I don't live on. I think is worthless, and, you know, have a great day. So, which is why Hunter Chapman is first in this suit as opposed to a relative of John Botts. Because what Hunter Chapman did is he gathered a big portion of this property from the relatives in the county, and then relatives that were not in the county. So, but as part of the suit, before I can sell the property, a certificate of title is done. And in that certificate of title, it talks about the description of the property, right? And it talks about all, and this, you know, who owns a judgment, who owns it, and when it was conveyed to other people. So you find all of those things in a chancery suit, which is a wealth of information. This is the free database. So if you know the name of your family, you can go to Loudoun County Circuit Court, Fauquier Circuit Court. You can just type in the name, search my name, and it will bring up any cases that involve that family. And when you see, for example, a Fauquier Board of Supervisors or a Loudoun Board of Supervisors, pretty good chance that it's a chancery case of people looking to find heirs and sell the property. So, and what do we know from, and this database is free. What do we know? Well, we know that there was a trial, right? And then it has the types of pleadings, but you know what else it also tells us? The people that we served. So if you're looking for a relative, so the certificate of service, like certificate of services are done by mailing. But with respect to, let's say, Randolph Tyler, he was a relative of Mr. Botts. He may have been a relative of you. He was in person notified in court. So that means there's an address for him, a current address of someone that you may not have known or kept track of for years. We have this one, this is posted, Donna Tyler posted. I mean, she had a residence that it was posted to, family member, right? We have Mary Tyler, we have a family member who accepted service. So we know that these folks are out there, like not served. Cynthia Craig Benjamin. So it just gives us an address. It gives us an opportunity, and under certificate of service, that would be the last address. In person, we know that they actually are physically available for us to talk to. Also, in that file, that chancery file, you're going to find an abstract of title. And what's great about abstracts of title, it has usually a family tree. So if you can hook one of your relatives to these chancery suits, here's a family tree. These cases also go to a commissioner in chancery. It's an individual who the court appoints to make sure that all the heirs are notified. And in the reports of commissioner and chanceries are all kinds of information that talks about, the origin of the case, talks about the value of the property, a description of the property, the cost of the case. And then I know it's too small for you to see, but it breaks down every single heir that they were able to find and the percentage of the property that they own. And so here's a wealth of information for people who are doing research as far as what they own. So before the Chancery Record Index, what we had to do was we had to do it the hard way, right? We had to go visit censuses, and I was doing this before censuses were even indexed, right? So you had to kind of guess where the location was and start doing research. Now, of course, you can put in a name and find out where they are. But the Chancery Records Index was a project that was commissioned by the Commonwealth of Virginia. And what the clerks did was they, with the help of volunteers, scanned all of the records for the Chancery Index, which became available for free for us to use whenever we believe we have a Chancery case. So I'm going to go through that a little bit. So this is the landing page. Now, how do you find this landing page at the Library of Virginia? Have anyone tried to research something at the Library of Virginia? It's just a wealth of data, right? So I was fortunate enough to attend a presentation one time from the person who was in charge of this program. I said, how do you find the landing page easily? Google it. Okay, because you can go to the Library of Virginia main page and you can have to drill down. If you just Google Library of Virginia Chancery Index, it will get you to this landing page a lot faster than if you go to the Library of Virginia page, because that is a dynamic page. It changes when new things are being offered. So, or Bing or whatever search engine that you use, you can put in the Chancery Record Index. They have what's called frequently asked questions. I suggest that you read that first. I didn't, would have saved myself a lot of time, but you can do that. The other thing you want to do, make sure, like this is an older page, you want to make sure what, it's an ongoing project. I mean, many of these records have already been scanned in, but you don't want to be spending time researching a county that hasn't scanned the records, because then you're just wasting your time. They have search tips. The default is all localities. You can search multiple localities by using the control key. And then there's no wildcards. So I'm going to actually see if I can get this. Oh, I can't do this there, right? I have to do this with the link. So. Okay, is it sharing the screen?
It's not.
Okay. So for our virtual people, she's going to make it share the screen with them.
Just continue to.
Okay. So this is the actual live landing page. And so you need to fix it. Go ahead and fix it. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So as I said before, there's a frequently asked questions page, right? And you can look at that, and it talks about what's new, featured collections, all kinds of things, right? And see how it's home, collections, chancery. And it describes to you what a chancery cause is. And a chancery cause is a case in equity where justice is administered according to the fairness is contrasted with the strictly formulated rules of common law. In layman's terms, it's a case that one that could not readily be decided by existing written laws. The judge, not a jury, decides chancery cases. Juries decide cases at law. And then it gives the types of information that you can find in a Chancery Record Index. Many of these things we already went over. So one useful information index, numbers that begin with 111 denote a case for which a year could not be determined. I have run across that too often. And then this tells you how to get the information or ordering materials. What you're going to find in the chancery cause are a bill of complaint, a bill, or a bill of injunction. The law changed about 20 years ago in Virginia, but those aren't generally records you're going to be primarily interested in. And you're not going to see a CH in any case filed prior to, I'm sorry, after, I forgot what the exact year was, like, let's say 2000. You're just going to see CL, but the records we're concerned with, you will see a CH. These are some abbreviations. So ANSI, C, et cetera, administrator, administrator, assigner, committee. These are general terms that you're going to see. And you're also going to notice that most of the clerks had beautiful handwriting. And so you're going to get familiar with their letters. But there's also on here somewhere, once you see some of these records, you're going to notice there's a consistency with respect to how they may write the letter F, which to us may look like an S. So you keep your own little key if you're researching records of your individual ancestor, because it gets easier. Yes.
Do you need to switch back yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'll probably be in this for the rest of the presentation.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, so let's go to search the index. So since we have some Loudoun County natives here, why don't we just go to Loudoun County? Sometimes we get lucky and sometimes. So, do you have a relative that you're looking for, ma'am, in Loudoun County?
Not really.
Okay, how about you?
Mine died shortly after they got here.
Give me a name, let's see.
It would be Gustavus Brown.
Okay, so the last name's Brown?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I just put in, well, actually, I will put in a surname. Pretty common. And they have here box cases referencing enslaved persons, cases referencing enslaved person. The way I search is I start broad, right? I don't start clicking any boxes. I just want to see what I get. Now, Brown's a pretty common name, so let's see if we get all kinds of cases. So we have petition, we have 215 records, and it goes from earliest date to latest date, okay? So we have Thomas Brown. Any relation to Thomas Brown? Okay. Hezekiah Clemens, Margaret Brown, Isaac Brown, Henry Brown. So let's just see what's on Mr. Brown's. So first thing that you're going to, so there's 4 records in this case, right? The first thing that you're going to see is what the researcher did as far as the cover sheet. And on the cover sheet, we have Joseph Brown and Jane Middleton. So we know that there was something involved in there. We have the surname Brown. We have Charles, who was enslaved. We have Pat, who was enslaved. The format is scanned. And then we can go to the next document. Again, beautiful handwriting. I can't have to make it bigger. I think it's bigger. So this talks about a Sam Joseph Brown living. Trying to give you a sense of what this case is about. Page. So this. This page is the slave that you're going to find any of these files. And that comes to the worshipful court of Loudoun County. The petition of Thomas Brown. What was the name of your relative?
Miss Thomas.
Casadas, so we'll put in G, so let's go back, so you can have this round down. Zero reference. Anyone else have a local name?
Titus,
Titus? Okay. So for Titus, we have starting in 1792. So we have a Francis Titus, so let's just look at this one, and the defendant is his widow. So we're going to look at the details of that case, again, 4 pages. So this is, again, what you're going to find in this file. And so this will be the cover sheet and the names. So Thomas Craven is deceased. The chancery cause we have these are the people who are mentioned in this will. Isaac Abner, Margaret, John Josiah, Elizabeth and William Craven, Joseph Thomas, Eleanor. So it gives you a list of all the names of people involved. So these could be family members or just heirs. This has a lot of delineation in it. So this is the Commonwealth of Virginia to the Sheriff of Loudoun County. That you have permission and they're suing someone over an estate. So there may have been a dispute about the property or how the property was left. Again, this is the original filing paper that you're going to find on any of these files if you go over to the courthouse. And the same. Did they have, was that from online someone?
no, that was from me.
Okay, so do you have a first name or?
Yeah. IV Titus would be kind of closer to like the 18 or
Okay.
around 1900.
Okay, so let's go to. Search, closer to the 1900s.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 1833. Hattie v. Titus?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a case from 1902. Again, this is the cover sheet. So we have Virginia and Mary Titus as infants. We have Samuel Titus as the administrator. And it has 275 pages in it. Have you seen this record before? Yeah. So this is the cover sheet that kind of tells you what's going on. 4 cover sheets. And then this first sheet here, this is the complaint. And this is what they're asking the court to do. And it looks like a small tract of land and some personal property. So there's a dispute about land and property with respect to Hattie. And is it her minor children that she's fighting for? Okay. So it's like kind of an overall sense. And see what I mean about the handwriting? The handwriting is beautiful, but you do have to, and since this has a lot of pages in it, start making it a little key first. Like once you figure it out that, like if you see a word like for and you think it's sore, but you know it's for, like keep in mind, it may look like an S to us, but it's an F. So when you see other words that you can't puzzle out. So this talks about 35 acres. And then 75 acres, so it's a lot of yeah, one stick property. So this is So since you're here,
Yeah.
so tell us about Hattie and what she was trying to do.
So Hattie, was her husband passed away, but her husband owned land, and I kind of got lost in the weeds, and that usually happens with the chancery cases a little bit. But it's my belief that she was fighting for her children who were still minors to be able to sell the land to then be able to live in Leesburg, to buy a house in Leesburg. So she was fighting to be able to have the right to be able to sell on behalf of her children so they could live in Leesburg.
So did he leave her a dower interest?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So she was suing as the fiduciary on their behalf to sell the land. So she may have had that 1/3 interest that I talked to you about. And were these children with the deceased?
Yes.
Okay. So she probably had a dower interest of 1/3, but her selling 1/3 isn't going to help them. And she needed to get permission of the courts to probably sell their 2/3 along with her 1/3 to purchase another property. Was she successful?
I believe so, yes.
So, again, there's a lot of paperwork in this case, and what's interesting about it. So, okay, so then there were debts on the property, so they had to pay the debts in order to clear the title. And it could have just been fees for the chancery suit. And plus she has to sue anyone who may have an interest in the property. And it doesn't look like there is. So there was a commissioner on chancery report here. Fortunately, it's typed. And here she's talking about the state of her husband, the money. He borrowed from someone, and so I don't know if she's objecting to the payment of having to repay Celia White, or whether she's saying, it's okay, you can pay Celia to clear the title to the property. But these are the types of documents that you're going to find in a chancery suit. But eventually, it looks like there is a commissioner of sales. So eventually the property was sold because the court did appoint a commissioner to sell the property on behalf of Hattie and her children. So you can see how this could be a very beneficial tool if you were looking for information. Now let's go. I have been looking for someone forever. And just so happened, how many of you use Ancestry? Yeah, okay. So and every once in a while, and hence things will pop up. And I've been looking for this Thomas Burroughs, and of course, it's not that unusual a name. And I don't put anything in my tree unless it's sourced. And so there's 2 Thomas Burroughs, and some family trees have it and some don't. And I don't think I'm related to the one that was in Frederick, but I can't definitively state because of his wife's name, which wasn't clear. So I'm going to put in, and of course, so let's do this. So because Burroughs can be spelled, I've seen it spelled B-U-R with 1 R, B-U-R-R, B-U-R-O-G-H without the U. So I always, again, I start broad. Some people start with the exact spelling and they're incredibly successful. That has never been my experience. If I start too narrow, I come up with 0. So I'm just going to start with B-U-R-R. And I'll do, now I'm going to, let's see, I'll do love and I'll do here and Frederick. Let's see what comes up. Well, okay, I have, birds, not what I'm looking for. James Bird, not what I'm looking for. And that's it, so there's still not a lot there. I get nothing with Burroughs. Yeah, still not doing anything. So it's interesting, isn't it, that, and these are ways to confirm things that you may find in other search engines about whether or not these types of things really happen. This is interesting. So here we have in Frederick County, it talks about when indexes are available. Index information 1745 to 1926 talks about the microfilm. Digital images for the years 1860 to 1912. It also tells you where you can find those post 1912. So anyone have a name they want me to research?
I have Javens in the Fairfax County.
Javins, Javins. Okay,
Yeah, that's a Fairfax County.
okay, so we'll change it to Fairfax. Excellent. Javins. The reason why I don't put in plaintiff or defendant, because I don't know if my relative was involved in a lawsuit. So I just put it under the general surname. So let's hit search. Okay. So we have some Javins, but if you'll notice the plaintiff that says administrator of Elijah Jewell and defendant is John Colvin, and you don't see Javins. But let's see on the detail sheet. Javins is somewhere mentioned in this suit because its name was picked up. So this has to do with administer versus John Congdon and Thompson Jarvis. Still, that doesn't make any sense to me. So let's go back to the index. We have William Javins. Look that up. So that suit was from 1846. And this was, let me see. We have a Compton, Shreve, Johnson, Broaders, Javins versus William Javins and C. So let's see what's in here. 58 pages. Okay, so there's really read them about. So it starts with the usual flowery language of, to the court. And you see how dense this writing is. So let's see what his complaint was. It has to do with the will, talks about the part of his life, to dispose of his estate. Let's see if we go next. Your complainants are saying that William Javis I'm happy about something. Let's see next. Javis owes people money. So, then we have Robert Shreve who's answering this complaint. And he's saying what you said isn't true, and he sets out his facts. Let's see the wins. They're asking for a preliminary injunction, so it probably has to do with real estate. Other people have answered. Did you know about this lawsuit?
And I am related to William.
Okay, okay,
He's my second great grandmother's brother.
okay. Trying to see what this was. This is Mary. And this is his proof of his case. Do we have a result? Okay, so they ended up selling the property. There was an ad in the newspaper from the commissioner of sale. So Mr. Davis was not successful in his defense of the lawsuit because the property was sold. But in this lawsuit, you're going to find names of other relatives because they had to find anyone else who had an interest in this property. So if you don't know of all of the siblings, this is information that you are going to find in this lawsuit. Yeah, so that's pretty good it. You can go back and find that record online. And then this is the sheriff just executing the writ to sell the property. And again, all of these things are considered pleadings with respect to this matter. Okay, good. Any other names that we want to kind of run with and see if we can find? No one? Okay. A popular name in Loudoun County. Okay. It's Alexander. That usually is a treasure trove of information. Oops, especially if I can spell it right. Okay. Right. So John Alexander and Joseph Janey, not related to either one of these families, but they're families that have been in Loudoun for a long time. So if you put in any of those families, you're going to find information about. So 1787, Mr. Alexander's suing Mr. Janey. Again, here's the familiar cover sheet. Here's the complaint. There's the binder sheet, and then it's the end binder sheet. So there's no plat. So what you're going to find on here, you're going to see in the index who are the names involved: Alexander, Janey, Balch. There's no plat. So if you're looking for strictly real estate, you're not going to find it in this particular case. Let's see, we have John Alexander, plaintiff William Ho. These are the names in there: Alexander, Butcher, Elliott, Ho, Huff. Right? So these are the names that you're going to find in this particular thing. Only 4 pages, and that's the index. This is the complaint. John Alexander was also an administrator of several estates, and you're also going to find his name there, as was Mr. Carter. As you research these records, if you're in a particular county, you will notice some similarity, especially if the clerk is involved, because their names are going to be through all of these documents. Let me see, is there? One layer pieces. Let's see. Okay, anyone have a friend of a friend? Because I like to do actual information that would help people. Does anyone have another name they want to look?
Involving in property.
Could be, so don't limit yourself to property. It could be a divorce case.
I have, it might be Annie Javins or Andy Sims.
In Fairfax?
Yeah, it's divorce was in 1871.
Okay, and what was the last name? Sims?
It might be under Sims or Javins. It'd be
Yeah.
SI.
Or Sims. So we have a Martha Sims, defendant John Sims. We have a Priscilla Jane. Wallace Sims. George.
It might be Annie Javins. Might have used her maiden
Okay. James. Javins.
name. Javins.
Who sued, the husband or the wife?
The husband, William Sims.
And what year was it?
That should be 1871.
Okay.
I've seen the chancery files of the perfect.
Yeah. So we have Martha, so we have Martha and John. We have George and Gertrude Louise. And we have Wallace and Melina. This one. And this one else. You know, that's strange that it's not here.
I've only seen it in person, but I am related to John H. Sims.
Okay, well, let's just fix it. So we have Martha, John. Okay, well, let's look and see. Martha sued John, so let's see. Do you know who what Martha's would have been?
No. I've been first one.
Okay. Okay, this isn't sued. Married to the defendant. That upon her marriage, trusting her affection for her. She has feelings for him. As times progressed, he gradually grew more and more callous. But she's unhappy. He defamed her. He denied her comfort. He became something to such a degree that the common vagaries and so this was in Alexandria. And after he was meeting with someone day and night, so I think she's also alleging adultery. He was not familiar with his wife, finally, as to seeking to became a burden, and so she has some complaints about her, this gentleman. Next. Offered her a bunch of excuses. He drank too much. He drank his earnings. So she was suing for divorce. She took him back. And they had happier days. And then she starts complaining again about how he treated her. So let's see how this ended up. Because it was not easy to get a divorce. He never intended to live with her again. Apparently he left her. So we had abandonment, adultery, and it looks like cruelty. And then he answers. They took evidence, so there was a trial. And these are the notes of the person who took, notes. Questions that were asked. Let's see, did she get a divorce? I can't tell here without going into it more whether she actually, this object of the students to get a decree of divorce from the plaintiff. Back always, so you get the other city. Yeah, I can't tell from a quick view whether or not she got the divorce. It wasn't on the first page and it wasn't on the last page, but she certainly was unhappy with her spouse. And back then you had to prove adultery, abandonment. And so what's interesting is the witnesses in this case were Beavers, Kitson, Lyles, Moore, Ogden, Sims, and Talbert. So they could have been friends or close relatives of the person who was involved in this lawsuit. So now, how do I go back to stop sharing? Hit stop sharing. Let's go back to close this one. Oh, yeah, okay. And then, let's see. No, we'll leave. Okay. Oops. Oh, that's good. Okay. I'll just start clicking and see. Okay, that is conclusion of the formal presentation. So I do appreciate those who gave me some names to search with. Is there any other questions or anyone who has a chat question? Okay.
I do have one question. So you were talking about tax record which are there. So my interest is less in individual records, is more in patterns over
Mhm.
time because I would deal with more data.
Right.
So in terms of tax, somebody must have done some work on tax fraud going on compared to related to the status of the person. I mean, when we look at tax manipulation going on right now, you and I can't do much because we are salary persons. But people who are in business, they generally manipulate taxes more. And it will be interesting to see how this thing evolved in the last 200 years based on records. I don't know what exactly is in the record right now.
Okay, so, debts on taxes, as far as chancery records go, relate to real property. And if they owe tax on the real property, that's when it becomes a chancery record and that the property has to be sold.
Okay.
And so that is the area of which I'm speaking today as far as tax on patents and other kinds of records that would be in the federal system, not in the local records.
Yeah, no, but in that also, is it possible to have? Because who decides the amount of tax that people pay exactly what they're asked to pay? Because if not, of course, you're right, it will be sold then.
Yeah, so the taxes are determined by the locality that's taxing the property. And that tax rate is set, and then the treasurer and the commissioner of accounts keeps track of the money owed. When the money's not paid, then the property is sold to cover the taxes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing was with names. You were mentioning Smith, for example, can be written.
Mhm.
Why was that the case? Is it just the person writing was not careful, or is it there was a reason why the names?
Well, it could be a very number of reasons. So with respect to my family surname, it started out Desbrough, and it generally ended up Disbrow. I think sometimes it just was easier for people to understand the name phonetically, so they spelled it phonetically. Some people shorten their names to sound more Angelicized, People have all kinds of reasons for changing their name. Up until the Homeland Security Act after 9/11, you had the common law right to change your name to whatever you wanted it to be, as long as it wasn't done for a fraudulent purpose. Now, of course, you have to go through and get a court order to change your name. And again, it's fairly easy to do, but you just can't do it now without a court order making all of your names the same. As women, we know. I know after 9/11, I had used my maiden name professionally, and then, I hyphenated it. And then when we moved to Virginia, I just dropped the hyphen and used strictly my married name, which was fine for like 10 years. And then we had 9/11 and I couldn't file my tax return because my paperwork had to all match. So I had to get a court order, pay my $29 to make sure that the name, so it was Jeanette Irby, changing it to Jeanette Irby because, everyone wanted to have it official. So we kind of lost after 9/11 the common law right to change your name. And we still get those petitions of women who say, I was Jane A. Smith. I've been Jane A. Smith forever, but because I didn't formalize it, even though I've been using this name for 30 years, and my driver's license says it, my social security card says it, but my birth certificate doesn't, we have to get a court order, which, again. So, yeah. So I don't know. People have all kinds of reasons for changing their name. Sometimes they change their name because they just don't like it. My sister hated her middle name, so she changed it. So, yeah, made my mom mad, but she did. So, yeah. And her middle name was Sue. She just didn't like her middle name. So, anyway, any other questions?
There's one over here. How were guardianships established or assigned?
Okay, so guardianships is a fiduciary role, which means it's a heightened sense of responsibility. So if you're talking about a guardianship of children, they would have to be petition the court, and the court would assign a guardian. And if it's a close relative, like I would sign guardianships all the time if it's a close relative, an uncle, or someone standing in a parental role. If everyone consented, then I would sign that guardianship. Sometimes guardianships are assigned just to control money. So you just make sure that the necessary things are met. And sometimes you would have to require a bond. Sometimes children with disabilities, after they turn 18, they can't manage their affairs. So their parents then, because they no longer are legally guardians under the law, petition the court to become a permanent guardian so that they still have the ability legally to take care of that child and make the decisions that are best for that child. So it's a multi-factor thing that you make sure that you look at to make sure that the person who's petitioning to be a guardian is qualified and is able to carry out those responsibilities. Okay. Any other questions? Yes,
This
ma'am.
is completely different. When did that business about the dower of a third of the estate go away?
I believe it was around 1920. I didn't bring my book for that. When the Married Women's Property Act came into effect, kind of lost our right to dower. So because supposedly then we didn't need it, but we all know that. I
I
won't,
think that it was in the 1900s even.
well, I won't comment. Men had courtesy, which meant they also received 1/3 of the estate if they had children with the woman who died.
Mm.
If they didn't have children with the woman who died, then they did not get courtesy. So, yeah, but women always had dower, whether they had children with the testator or not. That was a great question. Anything else? All right, well, thank you everyone who was present today and who are online. I hope I was able to help you navigate the Chancery website. I know it's particularly hard probably online and particularly hard when you can't always read the documents, but it is better to translate the documents, especially if you hit something that has a lot of names and a lot of information. And sometimes it's just nice to be able to say at the Thanksgiving dinner table, oh, did you know that Margaret Sims sued John and he was having an affair and he was cruel and he abandoned her? And, you know, all of the details which are set forth in the complaint because they had to be very specific back then. All right, thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.